Great. So again, thank you and welcome to our first informational meeting about the city manager issue. We plan on having at least, I think, 3 more of these at the public library. We've got sign-in sheets in the back. If you didn't sign up, please do that before you leave. And then also you'll find a flyer in your chair. There's a QR code on that flyer that you can scan with your cell phone. It'll take you to our website, and then you can sign up for updates on our website. I am not a public speaker, so let me get to the slide. Okay, so we want to start with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Beth Namati to come up and do that for us.
Okay, let's pray. I'm going to pray out of Psalm 33. God loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Lord God, we praise you for these things and ask you for your blessing on this meeting. We ask for leaders of integrity and wisdom and strength. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to stand, we've got a flag. All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so here's our agenda. We're going to have 2 speakers, Bob and Tiffany. Bob is going to talk about a little bit of the history of the city manager issue in Madison, and then just city manager in general. And then Tiffany is going to talk about what the future plans for Madison are. And yeah. Let's see. All right. So how did we get here? So a group of us learned about this from Margie Daly. She kind of made the rounds last summer. And so a group of us learned about the city had a couple of public meetings and public sessions about the issue. I went to one of them, and the thing that disturbed me was the information that was being presented was very unbalanced and one-sided, very much in support of the city manager issue. So we got concerned. We started doing our own research and sharing that information with each other. And so that's kind of how we got here. Our mission is really just to try to educate voters on the reasons that the city manager is bad for Madison. We have our opinions. We're not unbiased. We're biased. And we are encouraging people to vote no. And we're sharing that side of our point of view with people, with voters, so that they can see both sides of the issue and then be able to make a choice for themselves. So we formed a PAC. January, Madison Ford, we had learned, had submitted their petition signatures to the judge. And so we knew that we had to form a PAC in order to campaign against this. And so that's our campaign, is Vote No City Manager. So by us creating the PAC, we're complying with Alabama election law. So you can't really go out and campaign for a ballot issue without being a PAC. And so that's why we did that. At this point, something to think about. Would you want the U.S. Congress to select our president? That's how we see this on the local level. So something to think about. And at this point, I'm going to ask Bob to come up, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the history.
Thank you, Kathy. Folks in the back there's 4 or 5 seats up front here. If you want to, there's a couple over on the side if you don't want to stand. Okay, a very brief history. I wanted to sort of show the big picture of how we got here in 2023. And I want to thank George Berry for giving me the information on this. In 1963, there were 1,450 people in the city of Madison, and George found out that they still had a poll tax back then, but got rid of it shortly afterwards. In 81, there were 4,000 people, and they had a city manager. I don't know if he was titled that way, but he held that same position, and apparently it was a disaster. And both the city manager and the mayor were recalled, and they kicked them out and got somebody else.
That's the last recall Alabama ever had in the state.
I don't know if you heard that. George said it's the last recall that the state of Alabama had. Interesting. In '88, we grew to 7,500 people, and the Fed forces came in from and forced a change from commissioner-type government to city council districts, and they went from 5 to 7, and one of them had to be by law in a minority district. In the 1990s, Huntsville tries to annex the debt-free Madison, and the citizens voted no. 93, 15,000 people, Madison votes to separate from the county schools in Fort Narrows School District. 2015, there was a try by the politicians and the real estate folks here to create a city manager position, and it was vetoed by the then sitting mayor. And again, it brings us to 2023, where we think outside forces are trying to control Madison and institute another city manager position. So I wanted to look at and think, what's the big picture, and how do city managers fit into the government throughout not just Alabama and Madison, but other areas. And I did some research and found out that there are 19,500 incorporated cities and towns in the United States, and city managers have about 900. I couldn't get an exact number. I went to 3 or 4 different sources, and that was the average. And that's, if you want to look at it percentage-wise, that's about 4.5% to 5%. So when I did the same thing with Alabama, Alabama has 462 incorporated cities and towns, and I'm going to show you a little bit more information on that. And there are only 16, which is about 3.4%, slightly less than what we have nationally. 6 city managers have 1 or more assistants, and that's something you want to keep in mind here. We're not going to get a city manager. Most likely we'll get a city manager and some assistants, and then the associated costs and expenses with that. Okay, so then I did some research on all of I found a great source where it lists all of the cities in Alabama, cities and towns, and there are 462, if you remember that. That is a list of the cities in descending order by population. So then you look at, obviously Huntsville's number 1, Montgomery and Birmingham 2 and 3, Mobile. You come down to number 9, Madison has, at the time it was 58,300. I think we're up around 60 to 61,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I said, okay, how does Madison compare to cities in about the same number of population? So I drew a line 20% above by population and 20% below, and I came up with those 8 cities there. And you can see that Auburn beat us out, and Dothan are above us, and then Prattville is at the bottom with 38,286. So when you looked at this list, that wasn't a question, right? Okay. When you look at this list, I also put in there which cities had city managers. And I found out that the 5 out of the 8 in the cities in the yellow that are very similar to Madison have city managers. I thought that was quite odd. But the highest number of city managers are in that population range. Now, the larger cities, the ones above, and the smaller cities down below, there's not very many there. And one of 2 things can cause that. One, they don't want them, or they can't afford them. They may be just too small. I also found out that there are several cities that have assistants. When the city manager is in office, he has an assistant there, and you can see there's one that's listed for Dothan, one for Florence, and then one down there for Mountain Brook. And there, of course, there are others. I just didn't want to put a whole bunch of information up there. So moving along. I also did a search, and Margie helped me with this. Didn't take me too long. I found out that, do a search on the internet. There are 37 hits where city managers were fired, charged, or removed. That's about 5% on a national basis. And you do a search on failed city managers in Alabama, it came up with 3, Pelham, Dothan, and Aniston. And if you do the math, that's 20% of the city managers in the state of Alabama have had problems and they tried to get rid of them. Okay, so summary. What do we learn here? City managers are not the norm, but there seems to be a push in that direction. Alabama has slightly less percentages of city managers than the other 49 states. And then when hiring a city manager, I found out some interesting facts, like for Tallahassee, for example, in Florida, they just reorganized, I think, within the last 12 months, and they created 5 assistants for that one city manager, and that's the type of government they have. Now, all of these people are not elected, they are assigned. That's something to keep in mind. So these people have a lot of power, they have a lot of control over what goes on in your city, and they have a lot of control of money, and they are not elected or answerable to the people. Now, granted, Tallahassee has 196,000 people, but when you do the math and divide our population of 60,000 into that, we can end up with 1 to 2 assistants based upon the math and the examples we had in Tallahassee. Okay, I'd like to hand this over to Tiffany, and she's going to give us some more information.
Hi. Okay, so if you look at the back side of the flyer, there's a graphic that shows how the organization of our city government would change. Not all of you have it, I see.
There's another one up here too.
It's also right here. So the first point on here is that an unelected administrator is unaccountable to the citizens, and we no longer have separation of powers. So what would happen if we elect to have this governance change is our elected mayor would become an at-large council member, become the president of the council. He would join the legislators, and then the executive branch would be somebody selected by the people that we elected. It distances the voters from the person who's running the city. And the mayor will lose the power to veto. So if the council comes up with a bad idea, the city manager has to go along with it. He can't say, he or she, sorry. They can't say, that's a bad idea, I veto. So we lose that check in the checks and balances. In the December work session, City Council discussed a potential salary. They landed on about $183,000 as a salary for a city manager. That's not set in stone, that's just something that they discussed. But you have to keep that in mind, as well as what Bob talked about with having assistants and maybe even a car allowance, which is pretty standard for city managers. Okay, the next one's move towards 15-minute cities, more mid and high density housing, move to smart grid and congested streets. These are not conjecture, and I'll show you why not. Madison has a comprehensive plan for our city. Don't know if you guys knew this. Screenshot from our government page. If you search for comprehensive plan, it takes you to this page, and you see Madison on Track 2045. It's an 82-page document that outlines Madison's past, present, and future. And a quote from Madison Forward. Having a city manager would give the city a better chance at realizing long-term goals without the interference of politics. Without the interference of voters electing somebody who does not support the long-term vision. Sounds like they don't trust voters to make good decisions. What you're going to find in there, it's a guide for the future, decisions for where people will live, how to make a living, to find their quality of life, or how they'll move about. This is a screenshot from said document. I don't know if you guys know anything about 15-minute cities. In theory, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. The whole concept is that you will live, work, and shop within a 15-minute radius of your home.
Walking.
Walking, cycling, or other carbon-free ways of transportation. It is a way to cut carbon emissions. What this has resulted in Europe or other parts of the world is this is a blockade showing that you can't go in there unless you're walking or cycling. My sister just got back from Paris, and she told me that her Ubers in the heart of Paris, which is a 15-minute city, were very expensive because all the cars had to have special permits so that they could drive in the heart of the city. They've been trying to implement these in the UK as well, which has resulted in protests, which is where this picture was taken. Sorry, my heart is racing. Thank you. 15-minute cities also sometimes come with the traffic restrictions. That's not in the proposal of a 15-minute city, but that's how it's been implemented across the world. Another screenshot from the document, Madison on Track 2045, is this smart grid. It says, use can be shifted to off-peak times to save money, can shut off in response to frequency fluctuations. Don't know if you guys heard about this, but in Colorado, when they had super hot temperatures, people with Nest thermostats, they were locked out of their thermostats. They could not change the temperature of their own home. And then we're all familiar with what happened in Texas, where the wind turbines froze over because they didn't think to prepare for that. And people were without power for over a week. So that is a possible implication of being on smart grid.
Not very smart.
No. SMART is actually an acronym. You'll have to look that one up yourself. And that's it for me. I'm happy to chat with anybody afterwards if you have questions. Back to Kathy.
All right, I thought we would probably have more time, or less time, but essentially we're going to have some Q&A. I mentioned that, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. One thing that we need, we're going to be doing door-to-door efforts to try to talk to our neighbors and make them aware of what the city is trying to do with this special election on May the 9th. And we've got sign-in sheets in the back if you want a yard sign. We've already gone through, I think we've put out about 150 yard signs, and we've got more coming in tomorrow. And donations, I appreciate, I know there's a lot of people in the room who have already donated, signed up for updates. We really appreciate that. We do need more donations. You can donate either here tonight. We've got a donation jar. We also, you can donate through our website. There's a link to Give, Send, Go. And we have several blog articles on our website, and we're open to more. We're working on getting, Bernadette's working on getting a campaign of letters to the editor going so that people can be aware of this. But if we want to go broader with this campaign and do any kind of like radio ads or do phone polling, that kind of stuff, we're going to need more money for that. Also mailers are very expensive. And remember to, one of the reasons we want you to sign up is so we can get your email. Life happens to people, and we're going to be sending out reminders and hopefully text, phone calls to remind people about the election. And then absentee ballots, my understanding with the absentee is those are available April the 11th, I believe. But encourage people to vote in person.